Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you again to the NAMI 2020 annual conference. We, just as a quick, make sure everyone's in the right room, want to make sure that I welcome you to this workshop. It's Paranoid Schizophrenia, Neither Tragedy Nor Hardship, a Case Study. I am Angela Brand, and I am with NAMI California. We are so pleased to have you participating with us, not just with our first virtual conference, but also thanking you for taking the time to join us for this workshop session today. Just as a quick reminder, we are recording this session and we'll have the materials available for you after the close of the conference. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our presenter for today's session, Ralph Decker. Ralph is an architect by trade and training and has worked as a corporate architect for over 25 years. Lately, over the last few years, he's turned his attention to the writing of 2 memoirs based on his experience with paranoid schizophrenia. This talk today is based on his writings and exploration. He is neither a psychiatrist nor a psychologist, and so his only credential is his 57-year family experience. He will be reading excerpts that express his perspective and share the techniques that his family has implemented that had a positive impact on their lives. We will have time for a short Q&A at the end of this session, so prepare any questions that you might have. You can use either the chat box feature in the Zoom window. You can also use the chat or Q&A function in the Whova conference app. If we get to a point where we kind of run out of time and can't get to your questions, Ralph has graciously offered to connect with folks over email in the coming week. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ralph, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
It's Christmas 1969. I'm 6 years old. Despite the fact that World War II has been over for 24 years, according to Mama, both my Aunt Nadine, far right, and my grandma Myrtle in the middle were working for the Nazis. Not only that Christmas holiday, but apparently they'd been acting as covert Nazi operatives for some time, which of course was bad enough, I suppose, but what made it worse was that Mama insisted on making the point of it with furious clarity each and every time it occurred to her, which was really quite often. Sitting second from the left, you can see that Mom is clearly distracted, and because I was with, oh, I didn't do that, sorry. Oh, I got it. Sorry, there we go. Sitting second from the left, you can see Mom is clearly distracted, and because I was with her all the time back then, I understood her. That look I am all too familiar with. It's the look on her face when she was listening to the others in her head, as I used to call them. At the very moment this photo was taken, it is very possible, likely even, that she was communicating with her CIA commander or chatting with Martha Washington. Only minutes before, she'd been insisting that despite all evidence to the contrary, she was receiving a directive over the wire, as she put it, from President Kennedy himself, which was common in those days, unfortunately. Never mind that JFK was no longer with us. And yes, in case you were wondering, I'm referring to that Martha Washington, the First Lady, Martha, George's wife, Mama's best friend. We Deckers are in the elegant living room of the Huter family in Aptos, California. Nadine is my father's sister, her husband Aki directly behind her, and their 2 kids, my cousins David and Sherry, and I are sitting in front. We had all looked forward to spending Christmas there, everyone except the others, as I used to call them, in Mama's head. In the photo, Dad actually looks on edge, but the fact is everybody was on edge and doing their best to ignore the chaos, but that wasn't easy for those who weren't familiar with the ways of Mama. What I just read was the memoir I'm writing about my folks, and I'm going to talk about that, but first let me talk a moment and thank NAMI. Thank you, NAMI, for having me and not canceling everything altogether. It's a new world, the Zoom presentations. I've never done one, so you can kind of tell probably. And thank you to Angela for all her kind assistance leading up to today. It was wonderful. Thank you, Angela. And thanks to Jim, my buddy, who's helped me, who's my literary editor, and he's helped me put this talk together, and he's actually working the slideshow. So if the slides get, you can blame him if the slides get screwed up. This is me and Sherry. Regarding that Christmas, Mama's stuff didn't bother me at all. I was used to it. I was just happy to be sitting next to Sherry. We had so much fun that Christmas. I loved Aunt Nadine and Uncle Aki, and most of all, my Grandma Myrtle was the best grandma. My sisters, everybody together, I was in heaven. Truly, that was my favorite Christmas of all time. It was truly my favorite Christmas of all time. But before I get to why that was possible and what was going on in our family that had to do with me having that opinion or that feeling at that time, let's go back to the beginning and introduce you to the main players in the story. This is from the book. I'm going to read this one little section. Stella and Ray met at a church picnic in the fall of 1951, while Ray was a senior completing his engineering degree at Cal, and Stella was in the first year of her career as an elementary school teacher. They fell in love that day and never left each other's side. After a sparkling romance, Ray proposed at Christmas, and they were married in April of 1952. After the reception party, they got in their brand new Studebaker, a wedding gift from Stella's parents, and headed north along the Redwood Highway on a honeymoon road trip. On the drive back, they planned their lives together, and it was nothing but fun because Cal engineering grads were in demand all over the state, and as were school teachers. And so it was, in a little over a year, they welcomed their first baby, a girl, and then another girl. They bought property, they designed and built their own custom home, and they were off into their life story. They were deeply in love, and their future in the Golden State seemed truly golden. And it was for a while. It was after the miscarriage and a stillbirth carried to term when the voices arrived. The voices were passive at first, neither mean nor menacing, easily ignored. But over time, they became intense and strange, insistent. Suddenly, Stella felt a harsh insecurity and began doubting my father's devotion. She took to spitting accusations at her girlfriends, at strangers that glanced at Ray in the street, even her only sister. It was so confusing to Ray and to them both. But Ray still desperately in love. Then one day, Stella insisted they try for the boy they wanted after having had the second of their two girls. It was the early 60s and nobody knew what to do, but Ray did. Still desperately in love, he decided a baby boy might be just the thing to lift his beloved from this mysterious malaise. And so, not long after, they welcomed the boy they hoped for. And so I'm that boy. I know nothing of my infancy, really, but Mama tells me we were together 24/7 until I went to kindergarten. We were doing police work for the FBI. We were running all over Southern California, all sorts of assignments for President Kennedy, as a matter of fact. My earliest memories are going to the Riverside County Courthouse and sitting with Mama in the trial gallery and taking notes, and Mom was giving sketches, and she and I were on stakeouts for the FBI. Wherever President Kennedy thought was important, that's where we would go. She says, I not only merely accompanied her, and this is the funniest part, I didn't just accompany her, but I was apparently very good at it. I was quite good at this police work, apparently, and despite my age, even as an infant. I was talking to Mama the other day about this very subject, and we have a treat for you, and it's her telling us about that same time, just a few months ago.
So when I was a baby, we were in the car a lot. Yeah, you're not wrong. Going places. That's as a kid. I made you police work. Yeah, we were doing this. You mean they're German, yeah. But we did stay in the car a lot. That's what, I go just sit down. Yeah. I went. Right, they tell you to go. You were not. And that's what he said, I'm giving you your baby. lady is going to help you. I see. So we were doing police work. Yeah. And I remember going to the court, though. I remember that when I was a little older. I go in there and sit down. Yeah, we just sit down with court cases. Yeah. And then the docket, see, docket told me what to do. Certain words after the court. Yeah. Read this for sure. Go find out whatever you can find out. I'm taking notes. And I did. Go on. You were telling me to repeat. It's like you really? I listen carefully. Yeah. Even when it's little? Yeah, you're real little. That's it, you get me a baby, it's gonna do police work. That's the baby got me. All the way till I went to school. Yeah. Yeah, that's 2 or 3 years, 4 years. Kindergarten, and we're supposed to be at bullets every day, you and me. I remember that. And you were in the kindergarten. Yeah. Every day. Wasn't it the afternoon? In the afternoon, because half the kids went in the morning and they're half went in the afternoon. I remember that. Night. Right to bullets. Bullets in the plaza? No. On the road to LA. Oh. On the road to Los Angeles. Not in Newport Beach, that one. No, it's not in Newport. It's in Santa Ana. Santa Ana? Yeah. Right. I know you and I are in Santa Ana every morning as soon as we can get going in the morning. Every day. And would you talk to me about it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You taught me. You knew stuff. Really? And you were taught to us. We did some important police work. And you're a little like that.
So that's Mama. She's so charming. We have a ton of fun. And this picture of us is of us when I taught Mom about selfies. She thought that was just a hoot, and so we had that conversation. And so I quickly taped it so I could get some of that down. Anyway, so Dad's gone now. At some point years ago, I asked Dad the question that you're probably wondering about. The decision to have another baby in the midst of such chaos. I mean, right? Well, he told me, this is what he told me. He said, well, son, that's a fair question. And I'll tell you that what your mom needed was a bundle of joy. And that is exactly what you've been. He chuckled at me, patted me on the back and said, you're doing a great job, big time. Keep it up. That was my pop. And by the way, do any of these, did anybody see any panic on Dad's face? Anybody see any panic there? I keep looking for it, but I don't see it either. You know, he had two small girls. He had a brand new baby. He had a lot on his plate. He had a 50-hour-a-week professional position and a mortgage on a brand new custom home. And of course, the obvious, he was never quite sure where I was and where Mom was. So right now, I can imagine you're wondering about a few things.
Really, white shirt.
There you go. Well, let me tell you about the Decker way by sharing a couple stories about my childhood. Throughout all of my windblown years, my father, a spiritually wise, stable, and sensible man, but not a particularly passionate man, passionately insisted the solution to every problem was simply to love more. He told me 100 times since I was a boy, when in doubt, son, you got to find a way within yourself to love more. all the way up to a week before he died. He told me that. It was his response to every uncertainty under any circumstance. It was his first and last strike strategy, the answer to every question and the solution to every problem, to love more. And if things still weren't resolved, the answer, love even more. For Ray Decker, to love more was not a solution, it was the solution. And the thing is, he had this way of making it look so easy, so principled, so well practiced. The force of his character was primal. His way of loving a kind of primitive force. I didn't know how else to say it. So what I'm going to do now is share with you a couple of stories from the book that kind of describe the Decker way. And you'll get a sense of how it was in our home, that even though I was Nazi hunting as during the week, that the rest of the week was something very different. Turn that way, Ramy. This story is called Pretty Way. Turn that way, Ramy. Go there. This way. Let's look at the pretty houses on Chapman Street. Mama tapped on the window and pointed, insisting on the pretty way home as usual. Straddling the drivetrain hump from the back seat, I leaned forward, crossed my arms on the bench seat between Mom and Dad, and set my chin on my wrist to see what Mama might say. I slid toward her so that our heads were only inches apart. Feeling me, she whispered, "Hey there, big time." "Hi, Mama," I whispered to her, right next to her ear. After a few seconds, she let go of Dad's hand, pointing at that house. "Look at that house. Isn't it nice? How the vines are growing over the bricks above the entryway." Then at another, "Look at that one, how the maple tree shades the porch so nicely. See, Ralphie boy, isn't it lovely?" Whispering, "Uh-huh," while I watched her set her hand on my father's dress collar shirt and tenderly moving her fingers over the short hairs on the back of his head. "Look there, at that one. The way the veranda wraps around the house. It'd be such a nice place for a party, don't you think, Ramy? Do you like it, Ralphie?" "Yes, Mom. I think it's not my favorite, though." "Which do you like the best, sweet boy?" She turned to look at me, silent, expectant, waiting. I sensed her watching my eyes scan the world outside the windshield, it seeming as if she was trying to read my mind. Mama loved it when I volunteered my opinion, but if I didn't, she'd almost always insisted on my thoughts. She'd ask, then wait for whatever my opinion might be, never filling in with an answer for me, nor making even any suggestions. No matter how uncertain I was, she would simply wait, watching me patiently, as long as I took. "I like that one," I said finally, and pointing to the one with the large plate glass windows further down the road. She leaned forward to look carefully, her particular interest, her searching for the one I pointed out, feeling like a reward. Which one now, sweetheart? Show me again." "The one with the big windows, Mama. I like that, it's different." "Oh yes, I see. It is different, isn't it? More in the modern style. It has a flat roof, you see. That is a nice one, honey." She let go of my father's hand to squeeze mine. Pull over here, Ramy. Let's look closer at Ralphie's favorite." Without taking her eyes off the passing homes, Mama began fiddling with my fingers, gently pushing back the cuticles. "Slow down now, Ramy. Not so fast. Ralphie likes this one. Let's look at it for a minute. Slower even now, honey. We must see this one." Dad moved near the curb to let others pass on the little traveled road, but he was already crawling. It seemed impossible for him to go any slower. He did that because Mama insisted. You know, I've often insisted or felt that those rides, those pretty way trips home were the beginning of my passion for architecture and why I chose that as my career, but I don't know. Mom always liked to look at pretty things. In any case, that's Mama. And remember this story for later, because that's her true self. That's truly Mama. One other story. Our favorite times as a family were when we went to the beach in Newport. There was always a slight chill in the breeze on Newport Beach late in the day. It was welcome and took the edge off the hot sun beating down on the shadeless beach the rest of the day. But as the day drew long and we were all full with fun and contentment, the breeze turned a deeper shade of chilly and my father would invariably ask Mama, "Well, Stella, what do you say? Shall we head home now and beat the traffic?" knowing full well that would never happen. Oh no, we're not leaving until the sun goes down. Dad was kidding, Dad was kidding. He knew Mama would love the early evening when the sun was setting after everyone had gone home. I loved it because these were her happiest moments, when she was most present. Because I'm fair-skinned, and these were the days before sunblock, I would get brutally sunburned, torched red, which intensified the chilling for me. I'd crawl over to where she sat up, watching the whole scene of the setting sun, and curl up in her lap. She'd drape a blanket over me and hold me close against her body to keep me from shivering. The crowds of others had long since left, and our beloved Newport Beach felt all ours. With one hand, she'd point out the color of the water, or the changing of the light, the lengthening of the shadows as the sun set, and the colors in the sky. She insisted I note the softened feeling of the light, or of everything now, so unlike the harsh look of things earlier, she said. With her other hand, she was stroking my forehead or playing with my ear. We watched the sun setting together while she whispered to me how much we had to be grateful for. So much beauty, so much joy. She insisted I marvel with her at the magicalness of it all. It was nearly completely dark when we finally packed up our great picnic, folding the blankets and towels and collecting the toys, coolers, beach chairs, and umbrellas, and we traipsed to the LTD, our car, when I was a kid. My sisters and I climbed into the back seat, and using each other as pillows, we fell asleep. In any case, that's Mama. Remember this story too, for later, because that's her true self. You gotta go one more. Let's do it more. So more dad wisdom. More of the Decker way goes like this. Be careful what you focus on, son, because that, more than anything else, will determine the nature of your experience, the nature of who you are. He'd rub the top of my head, look me in the eye, and with a smile and his embracing wink, add, but you already know that, don't you, big time? He said it light as a feather, and as if such wisdom was a part of my very essence. He said it to me almost every day, is my memory. Sometimes serious, sometimes silly. And the thing is, he modeled it. My father's commitment to Mama was always evident. He never ever, no matter how strangely she would act, treat her in any way but honorably and with complete respect. Her illness was not her, you see. He never reacted to her illness. What I mean is, he was always focused on that distinction. He always made a point of that distinction. And he reminded me to do the same. So those are some thoughts about my family in the early days. And I'm going to read one other story here, a couple other stories, but this one is a little longer, and it's not nearly as lighthearted. It'll give you a chance to understand the deeper complexity of our home. It wasn't always so light and fun, of course. Who is it? Who is she? Who is she? The moonlight filling the room in my room is bright, but it's Mama's yelling that woke me up. I could see the full moon through my window. They're both yelling, but Mama is loudest. They're in the hallway outside my room. They're really mad, especially Mommy. She's screaming. She never gets this mad. Daddy is mad too, I can tell, but sad mad, not like Mommy. Mommy is mad, crazy talk mad. Daddy's voice is small, different, sad. I've never heard Daddy sad. Mama's saying the same stuff she always does, but just super loud at Daddy. You're with the Nazis. Whose eye have you got? Whose eye? No, Stella, you know that's not true. I know who you are. You're the devil. Stella, honey, why are you doing this? Don't you honey me. I don't know who you are. Mama says to declare the truth when I feel afraid. She says to focus on the good when I'm scared. When I scrunch down under the blankets and pull the pillow on my head, it's not so loud. That's not mama. That's not mama. That's not mama. I don't really know about Nazis except that they're bad guys, mama says. But I know daddy is not a Nazi. Daddy is not Nazi. Daddy is not Nazi. That's true. I know daddy is a good guy. Something hits the wall. Mama knows daddy's not Nazi. I want to wake up from this dream. I've never ever heard daddy sad, and that scares me more than anything. There's a crash, breaking glass, something else too hits the wall. Stella, stop it. Please stop. Stella, come back to me. I know what you're doing. You go to the devil. Please, Stella, please. It's nothing like what you're thinking. Your thinking is all wrong. I miss you so much, darling. I'm not the devil. I'm Raymond. I'm your husband. I'm here, right here, in front of you. Look me in the eye. No, you're not. You're the devil. I'm trying to keep my crying inside me, in my body. I want to be invisible. I hear Mama's car door open and slam shut outside in the driveway. Her car is starting in the quiet of outside. I try to be as quiet as I can under my covers. I want to be invisible. I hear Daddy hiccup and cough. Is Daddy crying? I don't want him to know I know he's crying. I want what just happened to never have happened. I curl up into a ball, pull my knees up to my chest, shut my eyes real tight to try to stop crying. Then I hear Daddy's car driving fast down the street in the same direction as Mama. I don't remember falling asleep, but I wake up because I have that feeling that Daddy is almost home. I listen to hear him walking towards my bedroom, and I'm glad when his footsteps are getting louder and closer. I don't want to be invisible anymore, so I act like I'm waking up. I open and rub my eyes with my fists. He stops at the foot of my bed, white shirt and tie. He sits down next to me and hugs me with his head right close to mine. He kisses me on my head. Hi, Daddy, I whisper as he pulls away to look at me. He doesn't answer, though. He just puts his giant hand on my head, his palm on my forehead, fingers in my hair. It feels good, heavy, but not too heavy. I love the feeling of his hand on me. After a long time, he moves his hand down. Moves his hand down. Hi, big time. Mom was really mad, wasn't she? He smiles a sad smile and rubs both of my arms like he is trying to make me warm, except I'm not cold. Everything is all right now, big time. Are you comfy? Daddy shifts on my bed next to me, turns and looks out my window. For a long time he does that without saying anything. But it's okay because I love him here with me so much. I just lay there looking at him and wait. I love him more than ever, and I'm not so sad, and I'm not scared now at all, even though I really was just a few minutes ago. His hand moves to my shoulder, squeezes me kind of hard, then sets his hand on the center of my chest and pushes down on me with his whole big hand. He moves his hand down and he shivers a little. I can feel something from him I don't understand, like he's trying to tell me something without using words. Finally, Daddy shakes his head kind of hard, 2 times quick, like he just decided something important. He takes a deep breath and says, listen, son, that what you heard before, that's not your mother. You know that, right? He sounds real serious, not mad or anything, but serious. He's looking right at me in my eyes. Your mom just has thoughts that are not hers, and sometimes she listens to them. The truth of her true self, loves me very much. She loves you very, very much too. When I don't nod again right away, he says, right? Yeah, and I manage to say, I know, Mama, and I know everything will be okay too. And with that, he pats me on the chest and with a whole new voice says, okay, good, that's my boy. I knew I could count on you. We'll make sure of that together, won't we, son? A tiny head bob and a wink confirms our agreement, like it's really all over. He kisses me on the forehead and stands up. Go to sleep now, and all will be well in the morning. I feel happy to hear his daddy, everything will be all right, voice now. Okay, thank you, Daddy. Firmer, like him, I say it. Thank me for what, honey? I don't know, just thanks. You're right. The truth does make you feel better. He smiles at me for a long minute, leans forward with his hands on my bed and smiles at me. You remember, I told you that. Uh-huh. You're funny. It is true though, isn't it? I'm proud of you big time. Okay, I'll see you in the morning. Then. Okay, good night, Daddy. Dad was diligent. He constantly and consistently made the distinction between Mom's behaviors and who she really was, her authentic identity, and the distinction between those and the things that had nothing to do with her, those that were only an illusion of her because the words were coming out of her mouth. It was extraordinarily important to him that I knew the difference and could discern it for myself. But I knew how to do that. I always knew. And it was important to me that Dad knew I knew, so we could do it together. It was this principle that was the central aspect, not only of Mama's recovery, but was a critical part of what maintained the stability of our home for so long. So as I got older, Mama continued to improve. No more Nazi hunting and such, but she did still believe she was Shirley Temple. Every so often she got it in her head she needed to practice playing the piano, singing show tunes, and she had needed to practice for her next performance. And the time was wholly irrelevant to Mama. So she, at certain points, could be as crazy as 3 a.m. So this story is one of those moments, me and my sisters. Mama was playing the piano really loud and belting out show tunes. And of course I was striking how loud it was in our quiet neighborhood. So Ivy and Lori were just really upset, screaming from their bed, trying to get Mama to stop. For whatever reason, it didn't bother me so much, but it was really bumming my sisters out, and Mama was not reacting at all. After more nasty screaming and desperation, and midway through Mama's familiar Oklahoma medley, Ivy appeared at the doorway of my room, and this is where I pick up the story. Standing at the end of my bed, she reached forward to nudge my foot and whispered, Ralphie, will you go and make Mama stop, please? You're the only one who can do it, please? Okay, I'll try, Ivy, but you gotta stop screaming mean stuff at Mama. Geez, Ive. Well, if she didn't do this, I wouldn't have to. Yeah, but Ive, it doesn't work to scream. You should know that by now. A heavy sigh, and I walked down the short hall and stepped down into the living room near where Mom was sitting at the piano. As I approached her, I could see she was far off and not aware of me at all. I could feel her joy, the pleasure she took from playing and singing. I knew she didn't mean to be mean. It only seemed mean. That her effect wasn't her intention was clear. I could see that. She was more distant than usual, though, unusually so. More caught up in what was going on in her mind than I was used to. She hadn't even noticed that I was out of my bed or even in the room. So when I wrapped my arms around her from behind, it startled her slightly. I gently laid my chest against her back. She was sitting on a stool and I was just tall enough to put my chin on her shoulder with my face next to hers. I was looking with her at the sheet music for a while she played, but that didn't seem to get her attention. So I reached forward and laid my hands on hers as playfully as I could, laying my hands on the back of hers as if we were playing the piano together. I wanted her back. I had to get her attention. I interlaced my fingers with hers to keep her from playing. Hi, Mama. What are you doing? Singing. I held still her hands, and together we waited as I hoped for her back. Then the moment ended, and she tried to play again. I hadn't gotten to her, I knew. You sure are singing. It sounds great. I love that last song. Camelot's my favorite. Yeah, well, I wrote it, I wrote it. She said it as if someone doubted her. She telling them, not me though. I did know that. And I performed it at the Music Center in LA many, many times. Her anger was not at me though. Now let me go, run along back to bed. As sweetly as I could, and a tone I'd learned might work, I said, but Mama, I can't sleep. I mean, while you're singing. It's 3 a.m. I whispered this right next to her ear, my chin on her shoulder and acting as if I was looking at the music with her, as if my sleeplessness was incidental to us at the piano together. And just then I made a point to release her hands a bit before it might start to upset her, letting her know I was there with her to join her in her singing. It's really bothering Ivy and Lori, you know, Mama. Something shifted when I released her hands. I accepted she might not stop, and that it was going to be okay if she didn't. When I stopped stopping her, the authority hers again, out of respect, she leaned back and turned slightly to look at me. I squeezed her and searched for her in her eyes. I could tell I hadn't gotten her all the way back though. Can you play in the morning maybe, instead of now? She wriggled from my embrace, wrestling her hands away from mine. A little playful, but kind of edgy too, violent feeling. But I was clear it wasn't about me. It was the absence of her making it so. So I held a little tighter again. A squeeze and release was all, and I kissed her playfully high on her cheek, letting her know I wasn't giving up. It was the kiss that coaxed her the rest of the way back to me. It made her giggle, and we tussled a little and laughed together as she tried to escape my embrace again. But this time, it was just us, alone. You're silly. No, you're the silly one, Mama. I didn't let go of her hands, though, and it was that persistence that brought her back. Suddenly, she kind of cooed a little, relaxed against me, and tilted her head toward mine slightly with affection. Okay, honey, I'll just finish this last song. Thanks, Mama. Promise? I asked as I released her hands. Yes, I promise, sweet boy. Now run off back to bed, honey. Okay, Mama. Good night. I listened from my bed as she finished the last song, turned off the lights around the living room, climbed the stairs to their bedroom, and closed the door. It was Ivy that broke the fresh silence this time from her bed. Thank you, Ralphie. I love you. Love is to look for the best in another despite the experience to the contrary. That's what Dad meant. Love restores reasons. What I mean is when you're able to distinguish the truth of those you love from the fact of their temporary behavior, the facts can lie to you about who they are. That's what Dad meant by loving more. That love restores reason. Later on in high school, my sisters were off into their lives. Lori had become an accomplished fine artist, attending the San Francisco Art Institute and the California College of the Arts, and Ivy was at UC Davis getting her degree in mathematics, soon to enter the Peace Corps for 2 years of teaching underprivileged children in Botswana. And of course, I missed them. They were my heroes and my angels my whole life, and I missed them terribly. And I was just your typical high school kid, me and Mom and Dad living together. And although there were still some curious delusions that Mom had, beliefs about herself and who she was and others, she continued to improve. Our time together with her authentic self was a larger proportion of our time together. So she was later on, from the little boy days, and when she was having those outbursts, those really subsided, and all of that sort of really she kept getting more and more present with Dad and I. But so I want to stop here, and I want to talk directly to those of you who are who are caring for someone in their family in these sorts of situations. And I want to tell you, our family, even Dad, didn't always get it right. We sometimes got it wrong, and we often got it wrong. And that's because it's really, really hard. The point being, it's not easy to be loving always. And the best that you can do is to really try again, harder, right? I wrote a story about a time when I was challenged. Here's a snippet from that story when I was in high school. And this is after years and years of loving mom and knowing her and being with her, that this kind of thing can still come up for you and still can be troubling. This is called Dinner Out with Mama. Your mother has insisted on Marie calendars for dinner tonight. She suggested other places because Mindy is working tonight. You suggested other places because Mindy is working tonight. Mindy is the super cute girl who sits in Spanish in front of you in Spanish class. She's told you about her new job being a hostess at the very same Marie calendars that your crazy looking mother is insisting the family dines that evening. You love your mother, but she has lately been insisting on wearing homemade skirts made from scraps of denim and leather she has sewn together. It's way too short, and she is too heavy for such a short skirt to look good or even acceptable. As you approach the door and hold it open for her at the Marie calendars, and your dad pretty much split down. You're pretty much split down the middle. If you hope Mindy is there or not. I mean, you'd like to see her, of course, out of school and all, but you're still worried about the awkwardness of Mama too. She's unmistakable, and you're wondering if it might make her think weird things about you, that you must be weird too, or not okay. Mama being so strange might affect her thoughts of you, the you she's gotten to know and like. She might not want to be around you, talk to, or even know you. You know she likes you, but seeing her tonight might ruin everything. It occurs to you that you could stay in the car and avoid the risk. My point is that as successful as our family was back then, as clear as I had become about Mama and her true self, her authentic identity, the fact is that there were many, many times we stumbled and lost our focus and clarity and became uncomfortable by her behaviors. I mean, I get it. The point is, I get it. What is important to do, though, what you need to do is forgive yourself. And what you need to do is pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and do it better next time. And that's what I used to have to do a lot. What you do is what Dad said. You love more. You find a way to do it again and keep trying. It's important, but it's important to know, and this is not my point, it's important to know that they feel it when you try. They know it. I'm certain Mom knew it, even though she might not be able to say it, and we didn't talk about it, but they'll know, your family member, they'll know your diligence. Your presence in being with them, in spite of all the challenges they deliver you, is felt. And it is itself a healing force. Your intention, your presence, your respect, your honor is a healing force. And I'm certain that that's what led to Mama's ongoing recovery and her success. And if you keep doing it, you get lucky sometimes. So I'm going to tell you one more story where I learned this to be true, and then I'll answer any questions you might have. This one's called Shouting Down Martha. Hang on, I'll do one more. Much later, after my father had passed away, not that long ago actually, Mama was living with me, and occasionally she would pack all her things in several large suitcases and various bags and set them just inside the front door. Then when I got home from work, she would sweetly insist, "Raimi, we'll be coming home soon, big time. I need to be there to meet him. Can we go, please?" Home being the homestead in Riverside. But on this occasion, it was different. I got home and she said it in a very different way this time. "Are we going home? I need to get back to Riverside. When are we leaving?" My bags are all packed and waiting. Everything is ready to go. Let's get going. I just come through the front door, and was walking down the hall to where she was sitting. I hadn't yet even seen her. No hello, honey. No hi, big time. None of the kindness I know to be Mama. When I arrived at the living room, I stopped and looked at her long and hard. She was staring at me impatiently, holding her gaze. I immediately recognized a certain look in her eyes. That curious look I learned was when Mama was not at all present, and that her thinking had been taken over. And I had a thought, something I'd never done in the past. Okay, now listen to me, I said louder and sharper than I'd ever spoken to Mama, and yet talking right into her face. I walked toward her, and while poking at the air between us for emphasis, I said, I need to talk to my mom. Is my mom there? I don't think she is, because my mom doesn't talk to me that way. My mom would never talk to me that way. She loves me. And I looked into my mother's angry eyes without flinching. For a long, long time, we stared at each other. There was only silence. So I bore into her eyes with mine and bucked myself up looking for her, reminding myself of who Mama is, that I wasn't offending her or angry with her, rather at the others in her mind. I just stood there looking her in her eyes as if searching for her. After what was probably 90 seconds, but seemed like an eternity of silence, I said in an offensive way, listen, you, tell my mama I'll talk to her about going to Riverside, but not you. With that, I turned and walked back down the hall of my apartment and yelled, just as I was about to walk out the door, I said in my usual friendly tone, I'm going to the market. When I'm back, I'll talk to Mama about going home, but not Martha. Martha is me. My mama is not me. And I walked out the door. I went down to the lobby of my building and read the sports page from my neighbor's chronicle, killing time. I went back up, hoping for the best, not really knowing what to expect. When she heard the door open and close, I heard her call to me from down the hall. Hi, big time, you're back. I'm so glad. I found her in my kitchen making chocolate chip cookies. Mama, look at you. She had an apron on and she was covered in flour. I thought you and Willem would like some homemade cookies, she said. Looking up into me deeply, her crystal blue eyes embracing me, but this time it was different, even better and deeper than the one I could have expected. She reached up, hugged me around my head, her arms around my neck, squeezing me hard and tight, pulling me toward her. Then lowering and resting her ear on my chest, she squeezed me around my chest and stomach, real tight for a long time, for a long, long hug. I felt something magical from her. There was some kind of transcendent connection in that moment. I know it sounds funny, but between us, that felt like gratefulness, like she was grateful and that there's some recognition for what had just happened. I felt like she was thanking me for helping her, thanking me for trusting her and helping her to conquer the others in her mind, even though the words were coming out of her mouth. That I cared enough and was able to recognize the illusionary behavior as not her was a gift to her in that moment, almost as if we were fighting her illness together. It was a super cool realization. I mean, after all these years, I'd gained a deeper understanding of just how alone Mama is and has been in her fight against this horrific, confusing invasion. Alone for so, so long. And what's worse, what's worse for all of these people that suffer with this is that the victim is so often blamed for their illness. When I think back over my childhood, I remember sensing her battling the demons that she knew, battling her demons often, that she knew that her behaviors were wrong without being able to control them. I remember her talking into her hand sometimes, knowing that it was incorrect, but not being able to control it. And this new understanding brought those memories all the way back from when I was really little, that there was a certain shame in her behavior and that she knew it, but I didn't really understand it back then. But I did this day. And what I realized is it just seemed to me that she'd been fighting this battle as much for my father and me and my sisters as herself. It is my deepest belief, and by this time she's, you know, in her 80s when this happened. It is my deepest belief that it was her continual battle, her never giving in, that enabled her love for me to manifest. In the midst of all of the trauma and drama that was going on in her mind, it seemed to me it was her fortitude, her grit, her power, wielded almost like sword and shield in a violent hand-to-hand combat for herself, her true self, on a daily basis. It was almost as if it was a kind of gift to me. So it's interesting because I didn't really think much about our childhood. My sisters and I thought we had a really lovely time, really. We never thought twice about it. My sisters were into their lives and super successful and doing their thing. And then I went and saw a counselor one time for some reason. It was a marriage counselor, I think, with my ex-wife at the time. And this is what she said to me. I had taken the time to explain the details just as I told you them. And this is how she reacted. But nothing is further from the truth. And then this is a little bit of miscellaneous research I did, not having any idea. But apparently Mom is one of a kind. As far as could be established, there are no known natural studies of any chronic paranoid schizophrenia lasting as long as Mom has. And she is better today than she's ever been. She's not perfect. It's not completely over, but she's still there. And I just saw her not that long ago before the COVID. So in closing, what I want to say, this is my memory of my childhood, that if you have ever asked that boy that was me, are you lonely? I'd have been puzzled by the question. Lonely? No. To me, lonely sounded like there's something wrong, and there was nothing wrong. What is curious to many, but not to me, is that I was a happy boy in spite of it all. Most of the time, and at least as often as my peers in normal homes, I felt a startling surety that I was loved, that I was extraordinarily precious and chosen even. But more importantly, that my spirit, the goodness at my deepest core, is the totality of who I am. And I'm certain that was my father, reminding me about my mother. I knew pretty clearly back then, even when I was fairly little, that when Dad told me to choose my focus, that his advice was about Mama, that he was seeking and sharing critical wisdom for my survival of her illness. And yet it is only now that I'm coming to a realization that he was in fact showing me a path to Mama's true self. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Just for everything. I've been able to spend a little bit of time with you ahead of the presentation as we, did our preparations and our conversations. And, I just, so struck by being able to see your family photos and hear your mom's voice. And, it really just brings all of this to such a personal level. And I think, sharing your story and the story of your family and, what you've been doing to support your mom over these years is, it's incredible. It's it's risky to share your story. It's risky to share your story when you know that your experience is different maybe than some other families and individuals have gone through. And so, being here today and spreading the message that, there is hope, there is inspiration, there is joy, even when things are difficult, it's so incredibly important to the work that we do. You've been really candid about your experience and, really being candid about the fact that you're not coming in as a medical professional, neither a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And, balancing that perspective, is really important when you're looking at, what it means to be a family member and to care for someone that you love. Having that space for love and acceptance, messy or not. You just said sometimes we don't always make the right decisions or we don't always take the right approach. And if we just get up and go back, I just really enjoyed it. We've gotten some really great comments from folks that are enjoying the time today. So I just personally wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. It is our story. It's just our story, and every story is different. Yeah. And I know it's hard, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have about what we did and what worked for us. But our home was happy. Our home, it was tricky. It was tricky. It wasn't always happy, and there were things that happened. But for the most part, we felt like we were in a healthy home. As strange as that may sound.
It's, we always say that, when you're raised in an environment, you don't know any different until you get out and you start to hear from others about their experiences. And, there's so much discussion about what's normal and what's typical. Yeah, right. Yeah. If our reflections on our experience are that, there were positive aspects of it, you've got to take that and hold it close. And, again, I love seeing the family photos. I love seeing, the picture of your parents getting into the car. I love it. That's one of my favorite photos.
Yeah, no, it's our favorite. It's our family favorite as well. Yeah, Mom is so, those pictures of her before, before this all happened, before I was born, I've always had this mystical quality about it. Like she was this, magical, sophisticated person. Her siblings told me, and Dad would tell me what she was like. And I think that's part of why Dad was, he never forgot who she was and held that dear, and really dismissed the rest. And sometimes I think what we do in these situations, or we focus on the dissonance, we focus on the problem rather than the magic of that person, right? And that's what Dad did. I can remember him sitting at dinner table, and Mom would say something really clear, like give a piece of advice, and that would kind of surprise all of us. And Dad would say he would dive right in and talk to her about that. He always made a point of expanding the positive, expanding her true self, and really dismissing who she was. It's just like if somebody comes to your door and says, "Can I sleep here tonight at your house?" They knock on your door. You don't say, "Oh my God, this is a problem." You just say, "No, you can't do that. You don't live here," right? You can't come in our house, And it's the same when Mom acted in an odd way. It was like, no, you're not welcome. That's not welcome, that behavior, right? That's not who you are. And so it was sort of that attitude. It was always, and I say that like we did it all the time, but we didn't. We did it a lot of the time, but it was difficult. There were tough times.
So we have just a few minutes left. And I know that we did say in the beginning that for those folks that had additional questions, that you're happy to connect with them offline. And so what I'll do is I'll grab all the questions and the contact info, and I'll get everything together for those questions that we don't get to. There's one that just came up in the chat that I've been informed that paranoid schizophrenia is hereditary. Were you ever afraid that you would get it?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a certain age when you're supposed to get it as a boy or a girl, and it did occur to me. It's occurred to me. I don't know to say except yes, and to stay diligent, and to be aware of my experience, and but it's pretty uncommon, You know, it's hereditary. It's a very small percentage of the population, and then the percentage that you'll get it from that percentage of the population. But it did occur to me, yeah.
Yeah. And just as a side note, there's a lot of comments that have come in, just really, gratitude and praise for your dad and the message and the environment that he created for you. And, I know you and I had a chance to talk about it, that, especially at the time that your mom was developing and displaying symptoms, the idea of family acceptance and love and, taking that approach really wasn't very common at all.
Yeah.
And it's really remarkable what he did. And I just saw that your sister, Ivy, is with us. And
Ivy's here. She said she's going to check in. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, it's really wonderful. We do have a couple of questions. Some of them were, let's see, let me pull these up here. We'll try to get to one before we close out. Let's see. My family members and I get confused about how far to encourage my adult son toward independence as his illness fluctuates so often. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, the fluctuation is the hardest part, because sometimes they're really good and it seems like they're making significant progress, and then you take a couple steps back and you're like, well, and what I would suggest is go to the light. You go to the light. When you see they're good, you encourage that and you trust that they're going towards the goodness. And when the badness happens, you sit with them and you guide them back to the light. I mean, whenever that would happen, Dad would say, that's not your mom. That's not your mom. But I do know that there are details about being on your own that make it more difficult and sometimes impossible, and that's understandable. I think it's sort of a diligence, but I do know that when we trusted Mom, she was trustworthy. When we really showed her and honored her and really knew that she was good, and that she, like Dad did when I was a baby. My dad, I mean, it's still kind of curious to me, his decision to trust Mom, but he did, and it was fine. I mean, it was fine. So I don't know what to say, except that I think sometimes that works. and you have to go day to day. It's day to day.
Yeah, and I think that looking at some of these other questions here, they're, very similar about, specific advice to an individual. And I think sometimes that's kind of at the heart of the work we do. The challenge is, it's also dependent on the individual and their where they're at and how the interventions were put in and what kind of medication that they might be on. Or another person who shared that their loved one is medication resistant, and there's just so many challenges to this work. And I think the more we can share these stories, the more we can talk about our experiences and what worked for us. If anyone here today was able to take some of that away as a tangible thought of, I'm going to try this next time, and maybe, that will be really helpful to them. I think that's really all we can do in this space, is just hope that our work and our experiences are something that can benefit and help someone else in their journey. So
yeah, I think it's important to point out that as you said, everything's different. But if somebody writes me a letter, I can give them more specific, techniques. I meant to be more available for that, but it was a lot to share. But I'm happy to do that and to be more specific and things that they could say that work for us, and be conscious for them.
Okay, well, we are right at the end of our time. So I do want to thank you for joining us today. We will work to get folks in touch with you that have follow-up questions, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Angela. Thank you.